There are some people suggesting that one of the signs of mental degeneration, which people of the age, he is 78, can be prone to, is losing your inhibitions in terms of what you say. So I think perhaps there is a serious component in that. It's been very clear, frankly, that Donald Trump has been behaving increasingly oddly. There was that rally where he stopped taking questions and danced for 40 minutes. There was appearing on the sofa of Fox and Friends, apparently sitting on a towel. There have been some very extreme statements about calling in the police, the military on his opponents. And it's quite clear that he is now dialing down his sort of on-the-record public appearances and just going to these rallies and saying what it is. Now, does this matter? As every pollster will tell you, the election looks to be neck and neck. As we were hearing from Kate, there's some polls today suggesting that Kamala Harris is catching up a bit. I mean, the latest, for what it's worth, Washington Post swing states poll has her ahead in Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, draw in Nevada, and Trump ahead in Arizona and North Carolina. Now, that would probably be enough for her to win very, very narrowly. But I mean, the point is that I think at some point the voters will take a decision which might swing it one way or the other. And I have to say, I can't see where Donald Trump, particularly where he is behaving, is going to get any extra votes that would take him over the top. Whereas one can logically see a reason why, as Kamala Harris gets more known, women particularly might swing towards her. So, I do think that it's, that there's kind of, Trump has reached a point where for most people it's not funny anymore. It is, to use that phrase used by Tim Waltz, it is all a bit weird.
Yeah, I mean, the occasions do seem to be coming, I don't know, thicker and faster, when Donald Trump is saying things in interviews that he does with this or that podcast or on the rally stage, which people supporting Donald Trump then have to explain away, or somehow smooth over by saying something completely different. Or, Donald, he says these things. What he means is X. And then what he means, and X turns out to bear no resemblance to what he actually just said.
Or do they? Right? Because there's always been an element with Donald Trump of just brushing off this stuff. I mean, I agree with Adam. I think some of it is getting increasingly weirder. But it does follow a pattern and a trend that he has employed for years now, which is saying things which are increasingly odd, are very strange, that he, this man is a media performer. He has changed the way that the American election is run because he's basically made it into a TV program. He's made himself the main bad guy, the main slightly, odd politician who's not supposed to be a politician. And I think actually in playing to that, it's kind of what people recognise of him, whether or not they fully engage with every single word he says. I do, though, agree with Adam that it's getting wilder. And the problem is that Trump, the first time round, he had all these wild elements to his personality, but he also had a core of policy that made sense to people, or at least stuff that people felt, yeah, I feel that injustice and I want someone to do something about it. I think we're hearing much less of that from him this time around. That may well be because his team have judged that there's no point in fighting on policy because people are not going to make their decisions that way. But I wonder, with it so close, whether or not in the end, if people are thinking logically about how they're going to cast their ballot, if that's enough to tip people just away from voting at all. And if the Democrats can get out the vote, if it comes down to the get out the vote operation and the Democrats are more successful and they have a better handle on where their base is, then they may well do it just on that alone.
Well, let's just imagine that you're right, and let's just imagine that Donald Trump does have a plan here, that it is conscious, it is in his terms a strategy, even that he can say things which seem way over the top, and he can rely on others to try and take the edge off it later on, which is what they do.
He can say anything because he's shameless, and
does.
Most
the thing is,
politicians
does it work to do that?
You can get away with it.
If there's almost no one left who isn't decided, there are no doubt a few, but if there's no one left pretty much who isn't decided, it's about who's most motivated to come out and vote. And that's clearly the focus of the Democratic side. They want to get people who would vote Democrat ordinarily to come out and vote, and they're not sure that they're necessarily going to do that. And so who's got the most committed and motivated voters?
Or who has the most effective mechanism of getting out the vote. The Democrats arguably understand their base well. There are some voters who will turn to Trump this time round who would not previously have voted Trump, and maybe it's more complicated for the Republicans to get those people to turn out and vote. It's more complicated to quantify them. The questions are they in the right places? And, you know, if you are pursuing this strategy, I mean, Adam's right. He will say whatever he wants, and he has done before. I mean, this is a guy who has gone through lots of trials since the last time he was president, and he is still in this position. I think that ship has sailed. I think the question is more about what is motivating people to vote. And at the moment, you know, Trump is in a decent position. You know, whether or not Kamala Harris is going to pull it back and whether or not she can turn it round, they are neck and neck in this race. It is incredibly close. This is not a guy who's trailing by 20 points, despite the strategy.
No.
Yeah, no, I think that's certainly true. But at the same time, some of the things that he was relying on, for example, the economy has eased quite a lot and has got a lot better. I mean, and you know, the other thing we'll have to look at is his voting coalition. Now, one of the things he's done very successfully is align himself with the Christian right.
Yeah.
Well, the Christian right doesn't like talking about Arnold Palmer's penis.
And also, he didn't strike the right balance on abortion for them. I mean, there were people in his team who felt deeply frustrated that he hadn't gone as hard on abortion as they had wanted him to.
And likewise, women, you know, one of the factors in this is that Harris is doing very, very well amongst women, including white women. Much better than Trump is doing, although he's had some success in bringing some minority men onto his side. So, again, you come back to, you know, the arithmetics of who's likely to vote and where it's going to go. And, you know, it is neck and neck. But, you know, I just feel that all the media commentary is, you know, Harris struggling to catch up, Donald Trump edges ahead. I mean, the truth is that, you know, she has as good a chance as him of doing this.
Although it's in the nature of our business to sort of call it one way or the other at any given moment, it is not actually callable. I want to come back to this before we finish. We had people like Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, who of course is a Republican and a supporter of Donald Trump, saying no, he doesn't mean that. He means the military being used to keep peace on the streets if we get some sort of a further outbreak of disorder. I mean, how seriously should we take Donald Trump saying these things? He is running to be president. He may well be the president, and he would be surrounded by a much more partisan group of advisors and appointments than he was the first time round when he was a president after 2016. So is this an issue? It is an issue.
No, it's a big issue. And he didn't say what Johnson says he said. It was quite clear what he said. And indeed, some of the people closest to him have even talked about executing military generals who don't do what he says. So, you know, this is being identified not by me, but by some Republicans against Trump as proto-fascism, that he basically does not accept the rules of democratic society. We know that he's said every single legal case that's been brought against him is unfair. The jury is crooked. The judge is crooked. He doesn't accept the verdict. He's already said that he plans on ripping apart the Department of Justice if he becomes president. And, you know, the logic of it is that he would use the forces of which he'd be commander-in-chief to impose his will. And let's not get into his remarks about there only needing to be one more election. I mean, that's pretty clear. Now, Kamala Harris, when she was interviewed on Fox News, responded to this by denouncing what he's been saying about the enemy within and saying that she would never criticize any fellow Americans, that it's an un-American thing to do, and it's not showing respect for democracy. But I think it does show potentially how big the stakes are in this, and a lot of serious people across the political spectrum are saying those stakes are real. Against that, there are those who say, oh, it's just Trump blowing off. You know, he says all these things, and actually when he gets in there, he'll be a conventional democratic president who will cut taxes for the rich, and I'm rich, so what do I care? That's the problem.
And it has come to the point where the Democratic side, Kamala Harris, have changed their tactics. I mean, spent a good deal of time since Tim Walz arrived as the Democrat running mate, mocking them, laughing at them, talking about the Republicans as weird. It's gone back to darker warnings.